They carried the boy to the heart tree as the light bled from the day, and he clung to Hodder's neck while the old gods would breathe mist and ravens on the battlements preened as if waiting for a signal. Bran's legs were dead weight around Hodder's middle, but his fingers were hungry for bark and cold, for the grain carved into a long, sorrowing face older than the walls around it. Hodder set him down, and the quiet woman Osha stood like a spare antler beside them, wary of the snow-thick silence. The air smelled of wet stone and sheep grease from the kitchens, of iron and old sap. Somewhere a door banged, and Rob's voice rebounded up a corridor with words Bran couldn't catch. The castle was full of those kinds of words now, words that did not want him to have them. But the leaves wanted. The leaves had been wanting since he dreamt the bird with the 3 eyes that pecked him gentle as a mother does a stubborn curl. Hodder, Hodder said, because that was all he ever said, and it came like a blessing and a sentence both. Wait for me, Bran told him, and Hodder nodded so many times it was almost like a tremor. Osha gazed at the face in the tree, then at Bran, then at the ring-hilt knife at her hip. Her hair was winter gray and her eyes were the color of river water you don't want to step into. You're sure? She said. She didn't make it a question because doubt had lost its footing with her a long time ago. I have to, Bran whispered, and when he pressed his palm to the heart tree, the cold was a door unlatching. There is a way your vision tears when you fall from a tower. The world is too much and too fast, and somehow at the same time the one slow thing in creation. Falling and falling, air like syrup, stone like forever. This was the opposite. It was not a fall. It was a spreading. The fibers of his mind drew out like threads teased by old fingers, and the trunks in the gods' wood around him stood up and took off their bark and went walking. No, he saw the memory of them walking when the world was sap and chill. He tasted a name carved by a boy who had died before the first stone of the wall was set, felt the knife bite and the sap ooze. He felt Winterfell's roots go down, down, under the lichened walls and coddled earth, into unquiet rock, into channels where old waters moved with a patience nothing else in the world had. He breathed, and the gods would breathe back. Show me, he said in his head, in the voice he used when the birds came to his windowsill. Show me, Father. The tree remembered many fathers. Bran slipped through them as you shake a cloak, letting old lives fall away in the curl of a lip, the groan of a knee. One father put a brand to his son's arm and called it justice. Another taught a girl the names of constellations while she pretended to know less than she did. None were his. He needed the smell of leather oil and the scratch of a beard at eventide and the way a long face can be beautiful for its steadiness. A bell rang somewhere far as summer and close as breath. He was not in Winterfell's wind anymore. He was among stones shaped like grace and piety. It tasted of incense and old lime and gilded dust and the sour of thousands of feet. It was a city's taste. His sap-threading sense recoiled, reaching for root, for leaf, for anything that had taken truth from rain. In the southern city, the gods' wood was a pale relic. Hedges, roses, a few trees too pampered to know weather. No red hands, no carved face. Too far, too far. The wind in him whispered, there are no mouths to see through, boy. But there were birds. He had learned what ravens saw. The ravens in Winterfell came to him sometimes. It had started as a game, a watchman's sport. He could guess which roof they'd light on next, when they'd give up and soar like a slingstone. Then it was not guessing. Then it was knowing. The city was hung about with pigeons and corbis and doves riddled with mites and gossip. He found them perched on eaves like beads on a kirtle, massed on cornices, nested under saints who lifted marble eyes to heaven and wept real rain. He reached for the nearest because hunger will often ignore the better thing for the closer. He was inside 2 round dark beads that reflected a world upside down. The world was a black river for a second, a city seen in 2 narrow circles. Noise was a hand that shook the bird. The thing that had been a boy and was now a green glimmer sank deeper, and the bird was easier then. He was perched on a statue, cold underfoot. The square was a sea of heads. There were banners like spilled wine and banners like dirty snow. There was a scaffold with black-streaked wood, and on it a man on his knees. A boy in velvets watched from a littered dais with the bright, brittle glow of a candle you know will gutter fast. A woman's hair was polished gold and coiled like a serpent. Ser Island Payne's sword was a slab of night that had drunk summer until it went heavy with it. Bran knew that sword. He tasted its oil too late. Father. He didn't speak the word. It spoke him. In the bird's body he tensed, and the bird tensed, and drew its head back as if in disgust. Bran lunged across the city, a tumble of wings. He went into one bird, then another, a child jumping stones across a ford with water seething, and the stones were birds. He gathered them as one gathers thread before weaving, and the birds came in a rolling gray muscle that clenched the air. For a heartbeat, there were no hearts. The world was feathers and will. Bran hurled the birds at the wrong brightness. They fell like a cloth dropped from a high window, soft in sound, sharp in consequences. They struck the headsman's eyes and helmet and hands. The great sword checked. Feathers exploded like snow, breathless, and men shouted and thought it miracle and thought it treachery. The boy in velvets reeled back. The woman's lips made a thin line. The man on his knees feated his head because a knot in the air had loosened and a note in the world's song had changed key. It would buy only a breath. There were many swords and a boy with cruelty for a toy. Bran reached for root. There were roots in cities. There are always roots. Not the white-hearted ones carved with faces, but the pale threads of figs and lindens and olives that drink so little and endure so much. The thready seeking of herbs that will never see true shade. The city under the city was a lacework, and it was close to the skin of things here where men had laid stones and centuries, each as if they were apples on one another. Bran had never tugged roots that were not old friends. It hurt the way learning to throw your weight to a horse's shift hurts. He pulled until the undersquare groaned, until mortar startled, until something fell in the river that was under the river. A fissure cracked the scaffold. It was small at first, only a shift of nail heads, a protest. Then a joist popped like a knuckle, and the headsman staggered, his sword skittering and biting into the planks. A splinter jumped up and took blood from his cheek. The crowd cried out again because the world had answered. Bran felt the taste of that blood with the same outdoor astonishment you feel when rain comes on a clear day. He was everywhere and nowhere. He was a bird on a saint. He was a tremor under men's boots. He was 20 pigeons that hit a page boy with a single mind. He was in 3 roots and then in 5. He had never been so many, and it cost him like a coin dropped into a well whose echo you count and lose. Gray cloaks moved. The city watch, their fringes dirty, faces like old bread. He saw a rat-hole shadow at the base of the dais where a tunnel gave. He tasted limestone and brick and a memory of damp violets gone to mold. He did not need to think. He knew the tunnels because the roots knew them. The roots had polished their flanks against those tunnels forever. He shoved. The plank under Ned Stark split like a lip. The man went sideways fast, and the loop of rope at his wrists bit his skin, and his hands opened for air like fish. The world was noise and birds and sudden holes. The city watch lurched. A squire screamed as if someone had burned him. Ned struck the edge of the scaffold, rolled like a man who in snow has learned to make his weight a friend, and found the shadow because Bran opened it, and then there were hands out of the shadow. The hands smelled of leather and old tobacco and the river. Their owner said a name no one heard because the world's mouth was full of feathers. Then Ned was gone, and the boards clapped shut with the exhausted sound of a drawer forced into a warped cabinet. A woman's voice cut the air sharp, and the boy in velvets shrilled and pointed in 7 directions. Bran did not let the birds go until he felt stone over Eddard's head like a hand laid tenderly on a skull. He did not know whose hands those had been, only that they had not been Lannister hands, and that was enough. When he let the birds go, they were only birds again, beating at the sky with a noise like curtains. His grip on the roots slid, and the city's underworld shrugged and settled as a sleeper does when the bed partner rises in the night. Bran tore back along the green thread he had used to venture out, and the moment the world was Winterfell again, he threw up onto the snow. Hodder made a sound like a jar knocked over. Osha shot forward and caught Bran before he could slide off his wheeled chair. She wiped his mouth with her sleeve and pulled him back into the warmth of furs. "What did you do?" she demanded, but whisper quiet, as if the tree were a sleeping mother one did not want to wake twice. Bran could not say, because if he opened his mouth the world would topple out of it and shatter, and he was not certain he could put it back. The heart tree's carved eyes ran red with sap that looked for all the world like tears. It had done that before. It looked like pity. By morning the ravens brought the news. Not in words, but in a blacker press of wings in the bailey and a strange hush in the kennel yard. Then the man from the east gate came riding with his horse foamed, and Lord Rickard Karstark's steward took a parchment from him with fingers that wouldn't be still. "They tried to take the Lord of Winterfell's head," he told Robb, who was all blade and anger now and had a boy's beard that came in patchy, as if the hair could not quite keep its promise. "Chaos and witchery, word is he was swallowed by the ground and vanished into some tunnel. The Lannisters call it an attempt by the old gods to murder the king." Robb's breath whitened and vanished as if it were already a ghost. He went to Bran as one goes to water. Bran felt the castle press closer around them as if the stone wanted to hear too. "Tell me," Robb said hoarsely, "if you know. Tell me if father lives." Bran's eyes were dry, sanded dry, but he had a picture in his head of slick stone and a man who had learned to bear pain as a conversation partner, not an enemy. He saw it because the roots still recalled the weight and the warmth and the hurry. "Yes," Bran said. It surprised him that his voice could make that word without breaking. "There were friends in the dark." Robb dropped to one knee and bowed his head to Bran's lap, because sometimes the old ways find you even if you did not intend to find them. Osha watched him with a woman's ruthlessness and something like relief. "Then we hold," Robb muttered. "We hold and we write to every bannerman, and we feed the men who come in, and we keep the gates and keep our land and wait. They say if a man vanishes underground, he's only a rumor until he rises again. Let father be rumor for as long as he must." Bran closed his eyes. He could still taste dust on his tongue like flour. He learned over the next days the PRICE of opening oneself to a city. Birds came to the ramparts of Winterfell he had never seen there, crowding like gossipers at an inn table. The rookery was a storm. Maester Luwin watched the birds with his face gone pale under the pretty chain he had earned in cool rooms among stone and books. He asked questions he did not know how to ask. Broad questions, polite and absurd as court bows. "Bran," he said, very careful. Do you think? No, that is not how I should say it. Something has happened. The realm will make explanations. Some will call it the old gods. Some will call it sorcery. Some will call it an accident. If you know anything that would help your brother steer what is to come, then you ought to tell him." Bran looked at Luwin's hand, which shook when he held it still. The man loved them as much as his habit allowed. It made him want not to hurt him with the truth he would not accept. So he said, not wanting to lie and not wanting to be believed, "I asked the tree to show me father, and it did. And that was all." And he did not tell them about being many birds or a fisher or the way the city tasted like burnt sugar hiding a rot. He dreamt with the tree that night. The dreams were not a place where he forgot the day, but a place where the day went on being itself in a manner that did not ask his consent. He ran with wolves with a body that had no legs and bit down on the throats of men who smelled like far spices in his mouth. He slid between roots with wet stone on his belly and came out where the sky was full of gulls and the air was a slap of salt. He looked through the eyes of fish that rolled in rich black water under pilings while the city stamped and shouted above. He went down a ladder into a whispering dark and brushed a man's hand who was moving like water itself, careful and implacable. He could have been a eunuch. He could have been a fisherman. He could have been a friend of neither king. He saw his father once, only a slice. Ned Stark leaned against stone, his breath ragged, the cords at his wrists gone and the skin there wept with lines. The man with him held a finger to his own lips in a shape that any child in any village knew. Later another man brought old clothes that smelled of somebody else's dead and a cap with the brim torn down. They put them on Ned Stark and made him shorter by telling his back to curve, and it obeyed because it had borne many things. They went up a service stair through scurrying shadows to the smell of dry bread and a cat's astonished face. Outside a door, night opened like a second door and a boat waited. Water lapped like the tongue of a cautious hound. A woman whose hands had hauled nets since girlhood took the boat's rope and did not look at the men. Fear and coin had taught her the shape of her head. Bran returned to a body that shivered. Osha had put furs over him and had a pot of some thick gruel going on a brazier in his room because winter comes earliest in rooms like that. "What did you see?" she asked. He shook his head. "Your father," she guessed. He nodded. "You did more than look?" she said, tiredly certain. "And he did not die." "No," Bran whispered. "Not yet." She stared at him as if something inside her that had been crusted with frost had started to thaw and ache. Then she ladled him porridge and pushed it into his hands, which had steadied. By the time a letter bearing Edmure Tully's seal reached them, the Riverlands were smoke and hoofprints. The Lannisters had moved in the night that followed the chaos at the September, and where they did not burn they plundered. And where they did not plunder they took oaths with the casual ugliness of men borrowing from a neighbor they mean to throw into debtor's prison later. Riverrun took the river in its name and made a wall of it. Catelyn wrote a line at the bottom of her brother's urgency in her own hand, a bruise of ink that looked like tears after it dried. "If he lives, he will come. Hold fast, I beg you." Robb called the banners not as a boy playing war, but as a son and a lord with a hunger he had not sought. They came, and Winterfell grew too small for the men and their noises and their annoyances. Bran listened to them talk and wished he were small enough to hide under tables again, or tall enough to ride with them. Instead, he sat in his chair at his brother's side and learned the faces of men who would kill for him and for reasons that were not his. And when they went out into the courtyard and turned their horses, Bran smelled the iron dust of harness and thought of his father's hand stroking his hair when he was a baby. "Keep the ravens flying," Robb told Luwin, and then he kissed Bran's hair as their father had done and rode away. Bran watched the banners go and saw the same thing as when he had held a bird, a single intent traveling in many bodies, and he thought, that is how one endures. Ned Stark did not go to Riverrun. There were men at every postern gate with eyes for him, or for the man any man might be. The fisherwoman and her husband took him downriver by night beneath a sky that had the brittle look of clay left out too long. Their little vessel smelled like a stable if the horses were creatures of the water and ate scales and stories. They kept close to the left bank where the shadows were old and the reeds talked more quietly. The woman told him of other men she had ferried without names, but not their faces. They left him on a reed-choked spit where the river widened, and the husband put a hand on Ned's shoulder once, roughly, as if he were sending a son out to something he might not return from. And then they went, and Ned was alone with what he had not done and what he yet might. A knot of men came before dawn to the reeds. They moved like clockwork set to a song of long acquaintance. In the first light, their leader's hair took the color of iron with snow on it, the black fish on his bee. Wrist was as clean as prayer. Brynden Tully looked at Ned Stark a long time because a man does not see the dead risen very often. Then he said, "For a ghost, you smell like river weed. Come. I'll curse by the old gods for once and thank them for sending you out that trapdoor, and the seven can live with it." "Your niece?" Ned asked him. "In King's Landing," Brynden said grimly. "The Lannister queen has her wrapped in silk and threats, I hear. And Arya? We have rumors," Brynden said, which is a respectable way to say we have hope. They took him to a place no map remembers, where a mill wheel went round and round though no one had ground anything there since the last smallpox. And from there to a hunter's lodge, and from there, changing horses, to a keep where a woman once sirened men with stew and laughter in equal parts and then died of winter in a year when the stew ran thin. At Riverrun, Catelyn's hands shook around Ned's face and did not care that they shook. She kissed his brow, and then she struck his chest with her fist, twice, the way a woman strikes the man she loves when she wants to crack him open and put a candle in him and keep him from the dark. "You should have died," she said. "You should have died if dying were the honorable thing. But there is something older than honor that brought you back to me. I will not put a name to it because if I name it, I will believe in it, and then when it fails me the world will be meaner than it already is." He held her and smelled her hair, and the day she had stood in snow waiting for him to ride up the hill from some border dispute and laughed and fallen into his arms until they went down together. He had thought he would never have that smell again. Human love sat in his chest like a weight and like a buoy both. They did not bring all the lords to him. They brought only the few who could be not trusted but used, and a map and wine. Robb was coming with Karstark and Umber and Mormont and the rest, and the Freys were a door made of spite that everyone had to ask leave to pass through. Tywin was in the west and moving like a winter storm that throws punches of hail. To the south, Renly had declared the world a kind place if you had friends and brothers and ate soft fruit. Stannis had said too loudly what people were whispering. The king was boy only in face, and that face might belong to different blood. I would, Ned said and stopped. Want is a crooked rider's saddle. He wanted to go north to put his hand on his sons' heads and look his daughters in the eye and tell them a father will keep his promises and his wife that he would not die anywhere she wasn't. He also wanted to go south and pick a city apart like a knotted cord until his girl came out of it. He wanted too many things, and the wanting made him furious at the world for not being one thing. We cannot do everything, Catelyn said softly. We can do enough. Renly will not be Stannis' friend, and Stannis will not be Renly's brother, Brynden said with the long-suffering air of a man talking about tides. Tywin will be his own weather. Your son will find the young wolf in himself. They are already calling him so. Gods have mercy, Ned muttered. And he will win because he cannot abide not winning when it is for his sisters and for you. And then he will not win because no one wins forever. The Freys will count their chairs twice. That's what the world looks like. But you're here, and that makes things look otherwise some. Ned slept then because the body had to, but he slept like a man whose back is to a door and a knife under his pillow. When he woke, he wrote and wrote. He wrote to his son, careful sharp lines that told him nothing of magic and everything of the main chance. He wrote to Varys, if it was Varys who had sent the hands in the dark, and made the letter so it could be read as a piece of bland old business by any eyes that took it. He wrote to Stannis because a thing that is right ought at least to be an option you can lay on a table. He wrote to his daughter Sansa in a hand that stumbled because it wanted to run to her and could only walk, telling her of snow and geese and the way Icicle Pond looked in the morning when you were little and would believe me that the dead leaves under the ice were coins from fairies. In King's Landing, Cersei Lannister permitted the story to be told that sorcerers from the north had reached through the ground like worms and stolen a condemned traitor's head from its law, and the king had ordered the city searched and the underwaste burned and salted, a comical order that would have rung like a bell if the situation had not set everyone's nerves to hearing it. She laughed in public. Sharp, pretty, exact, and in private drank wine fast enough you could hear her swallowing, and sat in her window for hours as smoke clean as paper rose from houses where men had burned the oldest beams because the queen had called them suspicious. Joffrey raved, a boy's raving with a child's threadbare majesty stretched over it. He called for one more head for every bird that had fouled the scaffold, and there had been 1,000 birds, so the city watch took men as if numbers were nothing, dragging them by ear from gambling dens and lovers' houses. And the squares ran glare where their mothers cried. Men of the faith preached as if the old gods had thrown a gauntlet, and men of the woods out on the city's fringes climbed into trees and stayed, terrified of their own prayers. The queen went into the god's wood of the Red Keep once, almost without knowing it, walking because wine wanted her to sit and she could not sit. The garden was tame, neat, self-satisfied. The trees were southern breeds, foreign to certain loyalties. She laid a hand on a piece of ivory bench, not knowing it was carved of weirwood, stolen long ago from some northern hall to make a lordling's bride widen her eyes. She snatched her hand away as if shocked. There was a taste of blood in her mouth. She could not have said if it came from the bench or her own teeth. The hound came and stood with her a moment, as unaccountable as a dog in a chapel. "Do you smell it?" she asked him, sudden as a girl. She meant smoke and doom, but she could not say that to a man. What she said smelled like leaves. He said, "but I smell it always. The city." "You could have done nothing," she told him, "because telling a man that is the kindest thing and the cruelest." He did not answer. He had been there and had been so slow, so exactly and precisely slow, because something had broken the world around him and he had needed to set his feet. He could still hear feathers if he turned his head certain ways. "See that the girl is safe," Cersei said at last. "There's some sense in having one pretty thing in this miserable place." He thought of pretty things and of fire and said nothing, his face a boulder with a temper. Sansa wrote one letter, folded in a manner the Septa would have approved, neat as anything she had been taught to do. It said, "Father, if you are in the world, forgive me for being anyone's pawn, and forgive me for polishing it as if it were a gem, and forgive me for every dream of golden cloaks and songs. I keep my head down, but I keep it. I am learning that kindness is not always sweet, and sweetness is not always kind. I miss Arya as a person misses the other half of her heart she did not know she had until it was gone. Arya did not write. She cut her hair with a knife that did not want to cut hair and ate what a man named Yoren told her to eat and slept like a creature that must be ready to run the moment it wakes. She dreamed of pigeons and a net that was not a net and a boy she knew without knowing how she knew him saying, "Now, now, little sister, now." And then the world had broken, and afterward a man had grabbed her arm hard as rope and hauled her away so fiercely she bit him. But she ran with him because her running had been planned by the same someone who had made the birds, and running that fits a plan feels like justice. Jon Snow at the wall watched birds fly in patterns no one had taught them and felt a pry bar under his life he could not name. He wrote to a brother who was his father now whether the world saw it or not, and told him nothing he needed to hear because the wall teaches you to regard words as tinder. He drilled, and he stood night watch, and he listened to the woods beyond the wall and heard voices that were not men. He heard the trees talking in sleep and did not tell anyone because he wanted the sound for himself, like a coin in a boot. Bran did not stop using what he had used. After the panic and the river of sick, he thought he might, but the old gods do not invite us to look and then bid us hold our hands folded. The world had other needs, and they presented themselves in a procession like petitioners. Robb had to cross the twins. Bran lay under firs at Winterfell with snowflakes melting on his lashes and went into wood outside the castle of Lord Frey, who left no room empty of himself. He looked through 2 owls and a fox and told those wise eyes of water's depth and stone's placement and the shape of the bottom in a flood. He found a way across where boys had held hands in summer and not told their mothers, slippery stones, and sent what he saw to Robb through Luwin's ravens in the shape of a plea disguised as geography. Lord Frey took oaths and gave grudges and a narrow bridge, as was his manner, and Robb walked over and did not promise his heart to any of the Lord's daughters with the kind of promise that counts. It was something, not everything, but something, enough to make one disaster a smaller one. When the Lannisters struck in the Whispering Wood, the trees spoke to Bran like drums, and he spoke to them back, sick with exertion and triumph because this was his brother's victory and his wolves and the old gods as much as swords. Jaime Lannister fell and cursed fate in a voice so beautiful Bran wanted to bite it. Robb sent word he had the Kingslayer, and the North sat taller under its firs. The price was men Bran could see in the moss with their faces gone to a kinder quiet. Then came answers to the letters that looked like they had been written by someone who remembered he had once been a fisherman, or a boy in a kitchen, or a man without a thing to call his own. Varys wrote without writing that he had had a hand in a traitor's survival because a city is a kind of theater you must keep going if you want to avoid real blood. He said, in a style so polite it could have been a knife, that he could find ways to keep Sansa's head above water if the Starks would not drown him for what he would need to do it. Ned read the letter and rubbed his eyes until the words swam like minnows. Stannis wrote with a pen that would only make straight lines, each word like a step on a staircase carved from pride. He would have justice, and his kind of justice meant heads. Ned wrote back with words that were also stone, but with so much sorrow between the lines that Stannis, reading, flinched as if someone had brushed his sleeve with a child's hand. Ned said, I cannot give you a trust oath and not give you all the men who would answer my call, because then I am a liar. But I will not set the north on fire for a southern quarrel while the realm is a dry field and autumn's wind is rising. If you come north with men enough to keep my daughter safe where she is, I will bring my word to you and bear what comes with it. If not, think again on what it is to make an enemy of a man who does not want to be your enemy. Renly did not write. Renly had songs and peaches and banners and a wife with a face like a promise. His news rode on chatter and on the backs of spies who did not know whose they were on any given Wednesday. He was a kind of thing the world delights in the moment before the world does what it always does. That winter, the last mild days of a year that had decided to make scarcity immoral, the north smelled different. Bran did not know if the change was in the nose or the nose's owner. The trees in Winterfell watched more closely. The heart tree's face was an old man's who has decided against an argument he could have won, for love of his granddaughter. Bran went deeper and went farther, and sometimes he came back to his body with a rage in him that was not child's rage at his legs, but a stranger wrath that tasted like cold iron and ashes. Once he went north beyond the wall and let the trees take him into snow that clung like a mother whose child wants to flee. He went into a bird there that had no fear and no sense that fear was a thing. He looked down and saw men that were not men. They moved like the still point on which a room turns, so that everything around them seems to shift. He heard their song, which was not music but the idea of it, as if you have been told the word lullaby but will never sleep again. He fled, and the heart tree in Winterfell took him back, gathering the shreds of him the way a midwife gathers afterbirth. "Don't go there," Osha said, with the authority of one who has seen what the world can bear and what it cannot. "They remember us too, maybe, and we didn't part friends." "I had to know," Bran said, and she put her hand over his double-quick heart until he steadied. Ned Stark did what he did well. He gathered. He gathered small loyalties, the kind you cannot measure in men-at-arms. He gathered favors that had been given to Catelyn's father and to Hoster's father and to dead men a century gone. He gathered the glances in council a man like Edmure Tully will always cast to the place where a father should be sitting, and he did not flinch from them. He kept his counsel nearly all to himself. He let the news go forth that he was alive because to be a rumor will serve a while, but when a rumor has teeth it is a better thing. The river lords committed themselves down to their underclothes. Tywin did not stop. He would not. He burned what he needed to burn to make truth run screaming into holes. If the Starks had magic, he would have gold, iron, numbers, patience, and a contempt for magic as old as the first man who ever counted coin. War made a road through the Riverlands. On that road, Arya walked with Yoren and his roughs, and she learned how quickly a man will sell the story of his soul for a bit of bread, and how slowly some pride will move even for fear. She said her prayer, but the prayer changed, and names went in and came out and went in again, and the important thing was that a child could say it quiet and keep time with her steps. She did not see birds act strange again, but she dreamed them when she did not want to dream them and woke with her hands clenched as if she were holding tight to a branch over a ravine. Sansa kept quiet. The Hound watched her with eyes that had seen fire's truth and learned to hate being instructed twice. The Queen set men at hall doors and bedchambers, and the men did their duty until Sansa cried in a way that made two of them stare at the ground and believe they were looking at what they had been long told was heaven. When Joffrey talked about heads and hair and pain the way boys do about dogs, the Hound turned away as if he could move out from under the voice. At night, Sansa went to the little gods, Wood with a nurse, and pretended to be pious. She whispered the names of the old gods because when you have been taught one thing and found it to be sand, you reach for the bones of something older. The Red Keep's gods would had no heart, but it had benches carved from something that was once living and had been alive a long, long time. She sat on the Weirwood bench and did not know it told her story to the root she could not see. Bran saw her narrowly, the flash of red hair in a city of dark heads, the bow of a neck stretched by patience. He could not reach her with roots. He could with birds. He sent one once, and it dropped a feather in her lap, and she picked it up and smoothed it as if it could be a message. It was not. The message, if there was one, was only this: I am not no one. Somewhere something remembers me. When Stannis moved, he moved like a chess piece cut from flint. The realm creaked on its hinges. He moved with Davos Seaworth at his shoulder and a woman strange as storms tucked into his shadow. Ned had not asked for that, and his letters began to sound like a man counting rain barrels. If Stannis came with vows and the formality of right, then Ned could bring his men and his conscience and make the north part of something that would not set their children to hating their parents. If Stannis came with fire and an appetite, the north would turn its face away and let the south go to its own hell. Much could depend on what happened in a single harbor and a single night. The pyromancers of the city were busy because fear will always buy the same commodities. Tyrion Lannister came into King's Landing with a deadpan humor and a face so tired it looked like it had been left to dry in the sun. And the city did not know whether to laugh with him, at him, or run away from him. He said, louder than a man of sense would, that a city can be defended with brains and barrels and a long list of names, and he chewed that list like stale bread. He sat at a table with the queen and the boy and a eunuch and a knight whose chivalry had become a kind of armor against shame, and made plans that would have been called desperate if the city had had options. Bran watched that planning through the eyes of a spider once. It made his head hurt with laughter he did not entirely understand. He saw the wildfire, the way it shimmered like a thought that had shed its body. He smelled the sea, quiet, preparing to become quiet. He saw the hound staring at flame and trying to stare it out of existence. He saw Sansa singing under her breath in a room with a siege set out on a table with wine that looked like blood for pieces. Ned and Robb and Brynden were not fools. They knew Stannis' victory would be the kind of thing that invites a man to call things by their names afterwards, which would be good, and it would also invite a man like Stannis to say, if a thing is named traitor, it must be punished, and if it is loyal, it must be used. The North might be used until it was no longer itself. They also knew that a Lannister victory in the Bay would be a season of another weather, a new version of the same old drought. The letters flew. Bran started to hate the sound of ravens almost as much as he loved it. On the day the fleet came up the river, Sansa stood at a window high in a tower and watched a green scum shake on the water. The bells rang and men shouted and swore and cried. She thought of a boy with birds for hands and a wolf that had run beside her horse once and trusted her. And she did not know if that boy was real, because sometimes the past makes itself up when you are lonely. She prayed the way a girl prays who has seen a head roll, which is to say without much poetry. And the sound of the first blast of wildfire was a new thing that made room in the memory by pushing other things out. It was beautiful and it was horror. Ships went up as if heaven had mistaken them for common candles. Men burned like leaves. The hound went out and came back and laughed with a sound that broke halfway and then went silent and then drank and then went somewhere he should not, which was to her door. Come, he said. You'll hurt me, she said. Because she had learned that hurt sometimes has pity in it, and sometimes has patience in it, and sometimes has neither. I won't, he told her, and his face was a lie and a truth. This place will fall or burn. The one thing you do, girl, is walk while you can still choose where. She went with him. Bran saw them through a bird for a heartbeat, at a turning of stare. He saw the hound's hand on Sansa's wrist, not rough, not gentle. He saw them go through a door into a different air, gritty and old, and he recognized it because he had once felt Ned's breath scrape that air. He went along the tunnels with them as long as there was a spider to give him its limited eyes, and when there was not, he lay in the heart tree and shook because he could see in his mind the great ships dying, and he could feel Stannis' men pushing their way through the smoke, relentless and doomed to be either triumphant or dead. He could not see Sansa with his eyes, so he made the roots of the city remember her and tell him where she had gone. They said, she went into the ground and into the night and then into a boat. That was exactly how he had wanted the sentence ended. The next day the city woke to hate as usual. The green stains on stone were permanent and would go with the city to its death someday. The small folk had thrown stones at soldiers and songs at monsters, and had as usual learned that neither was a wise solution when tomorrow insists on arriving. The queen smiled with a cat's tooth showing. The boy shouted until his throat was rasped. The dwarf cleaned his broken face and calculated a new calculus. The hound was gone. Sansa Stark was gone. News travels in city veins like wine travels in men. Each bit of gossip had its own cloak. There were those who thought the old gods had plucked a second Stark out of the boil of life as if they were gathering berries. There were those who thought mercenaries had had a whim. There were those who believed in nothing and said so to everyone, loudly. Sansa came upriver like a rumor that could hold a knife. She slept under a tarp beside a woman who had made children in a hut with leaks and had lost them to water. She woke with her dress reeking of fish and felt grateful for the stink as if it were a protection. She watched men on the banks and learned to tell which ones were looking for a lost object and which for a thing to break and which for a way to find out who they were. The hound talked to her when he had to and drank when he could and did not touch her when she slept. Then he left them on a bank by a copse of willow when the river curved toward a town square with a gallows, and he walked back into his own story because sometimes men know there is one thing they can do for themselves and must go do it. Bran fetched them. He had a way of being where escape flows would be. He rolled his eyes at the condition of Sansa's hair and then kissed her head roughly, like a man reminding the gods that a thing is a gift and not a duty to accept. Sansa fell into her father's arms and put her hand to his cheek and said, "You still have your ear." And he laughed with a sound that made his body shake. And Catelyn was crying before she knew it. The Starks filled a room with a smell like true bread. At Winterfell, Bran asked the tree to show him his sister, and it did, but now the images were not so much pictures as textures. The scratch of her dress's hem, the rasp of her voice grown less silvery from smoke, the streak of fish scales on her sleeve like a river's signature. He smiled, and the smile felt as if it made his face a stranger's. Then he looked to the north, and what he saw, if seeing is the word, knocked him back into his body in a way he had not yet known. He smelled cold unlike any cold, a cold that perfumes nothing and accepts no perfume. He heard the ice talk to itself. He heard nothing else. He wrote for the first time to Jon because there are things you cannot tell a man who has gone to do a duty except, there is another duty. "Brother," he wrote, and the word trembled hard enough he had to hold his pen still with his other hand. "The trees say winter with a voice I have not heard. The ravens make shapes at night that are not birds' shapes. The heart tree is not afraid, and that makes me afraid. Tell me what your captain thinks, because the news we are living by about kings in the south, it is a small news." He did not sign his name because there are names one must keep for oneself when the world wants them. Jon did not answer with words men would understand. He sent a man running to a horn that had been in dust for so long, and the horn called. The wall gathered. Men whispered to each other and laughed and told lies and polished iron as if it would make iron kinder. And they listened to the woods and to the sky and to snow that holds its breath when something approaches. Ned Stark and Robb Stark and Brynden Tully made a council smaller than war deserves and bigger than a family usually is. They counted the Lannisters' moves and Stannis' pride and Renly's ghost and the Tyrells' hunger and the Freys' cupboards and the Riverlands' patience and the North's wintering hay. They listened to messengers who wanted to be heroes and to old men who wanted to be boys. They sent Sansa and Catelyn north to Winterfell in a train that was nearly a rite, and the safety of it lay in its modesty. Sansa sat beside her mother and listened to the sound of the axles and wondered why the noise of travel could be as comforting as any lullaby. At the gates of Winterfell, Sansa stepped down into a world made of the smell of long familiarity, of the way the air sounded like a throat clearing and a song starting. Bran held out his hand, and she took it, kneeling, so their faces were at the same height. They said nothing because the inside of words would have been all wrong. She slept that night in a bed where she had once hidden a doll's face and cried until the sheets could not drink anymore. In the morning she went to the Godswood with Bran, and he showed her how to put her palm to the heart tree so gently that the first feeling you get is your own heartbeat, like you have made a mistake, and only after that the trees. "What do you see?" she whispered. "Not pictures, not exactly," he said. "Not now. More like, if a feeling could be a way to see, like being told a story by someone who doesn't love words. All at once, all true, all crooked. I'd like a story like that," she said, and he laughed, and some terrible thing in him relaxed its hand on his lungs. That night, the heart tree taught Bran a song composed of preparations. It showed him a woman mending a child's cloak as if the needle were a weapon. It showed him a man counting apples for a winter that would not be forgiving. It showed him ravens making patterns on a slate roof that the roof mocked and mourned in equal measure. It showed him the wall and the thing beyond the wall that was not a thing. Told him, "This is the news of the realm." He slept like a log, which is to say the parts of him that were wood slept, and the parts that were not drifted in cold water and bumped against the banks of reality and made a hollow sound. They whispered in the great hall, and the whispering ran out into the small halls and into the yards where boys threw lumps of snow at their sisters, not because they hated them but because that is how you acknowledge the weight of love sometimes. Sansa walked the ramparts under a sky blown clear by a new, mean wind and saw the sun like a hard coin no one had the nerve to spend. Arya had not come. Somewhere she was learning to sharpen edges on whatever she had for a stone. Sansa put her hand to the stone and vowed, "Next time it will be me who finds her." She did not tell anyone the vow because if you tell vows they can break for you. Ned came north not by the direct road, because the direct road had men on it who knew how to look. He came by a road that was sometimes not a road and sometimes a river and sometimes a narrow feeling in the woods that takes you where decent folk don't go. He arrived when the first ice on the moat wore a skin like old glass and a man with a boy's beard came out to meet him. Rob held him as if joint and sinew were the only important inventions in the world. Wyman Manderley was there with meat and with plots. The Umber wanted to shout. The Karstark wanted to keep score. Ned looked around and saw his sons grown, not taller but heavier with used lives. He saw Sansa with a face that had learned politeness as a weapon. He saw Bran with a face that was both his mother's and a tree's. He saw that the old ways had found the new ways and were considering an accommodation. "We will go south again," Rob said, as if there had been any other decision. "We will make them give us what is ours." Ned shook his head with a softness that came from a place deserts call oases. "We will go north," he said, "not with banners and brass and rage. With men, yes. With food. With every boy who thinks himself a wolf and every girl who has mended a sock until it could not be mended again. With ravens. With carts. With rope. With sleep. We will do what the realm forgot was a thing we will keep. And when the south burns, as it must, and when it freezes, as it will, we will be the place that does not break. We will take no part in the crown disputes. When the winter is done with its culling, we will still be here, and that will be power." "Stannis," Rob demanded, "the right of things?" "Right is a fine hard word, and I have built myself with it," Ned said. "This is older. The old gods do not speak to me. They speak to your brother. I think they are telling him, some do not fight product. There will be another day for law. This is the day for winter." Sansa smiled then, not because she thought the world agreed with her, but because she had learned a new sentence, and the learning of sentences is a kind of joy. "When the singers come," she said, "they will call it a season of holding. The singers will starve," Wyman Manderley pointed out gravely, then laughed it high himself and called for pies. Bran sat quiet and listened. The heart tree in the yard heard him listening and told him a story like one of those low old jokes that carry a truth on their back. Once there were kings and lords and lions and stags, and the wolves went quiet in the trees because what did it matter? Then the sky went white and the breath of men showed before them even unto the sea. And in that quiet a boy spoke with a tree, and the world bent, just a little, in the way it had not known how to, because bending can be a courtesy and not only a breaking. He thought then of the day he had filled the air with birds and split the scaffold. He had done a thing that went against the habit of time. He was not sorry, because sorrow is for things like stepping on a beetle without seeing it. He was not proud, because pride is a courtyard habit, meant for being watched. He was only exact with it, the way you are exact with a tool that has taken years of faith to make and will take your hand if you misuse it. He rolled his chair to the window and watched the yard where men broke ice out of buckets with the backs of their axes and children ran and slipped and picked themselves up with indignation and delight. He tasted the air for snow and got it. The first flakes came like strangers who used to live here long ago. The snow fell and lay down and decided to stay. Far to the south, the 7th September regained its arrogance and lost it again in columns. The boy king shouted at the wrong man one day and learned a new fear. The queen ordered a thing and 5 other things happened because the world is contemptuous of order unless you are kind to it first. Tyrion Lannister learned to put a hand to his face not to assess the damage but to remind himself that it was still his. Varys smiled and wrote no letters for a week. Renly's enameled armor went dusty in a tent. Stannis built a kind of mountain out of intention and prepared to climb it with his teeth. The Tyrells tasted air and decided what weather it would be. The small folk did what they always do. They lived. To the north and between, men gathered snares. Women braided their hair with gut strings that would pull a sled. Children learned to read not words but the way a fire burns when snow is coming. The old gods looked with the patient savagery of things that have lived alongside us since our worst ideas were new. The heart tree took Bran's hand one more time and laid a flavor on his tongue like clean iron. "You did not save him," Osha said, appearing at his elbow with the uncanny talent of women who have had to keep more than one world in their heads. "You gave him back to a fight he could not avoid. You made a choice that changed the asking of other choices. That is all anyone ever does." "I know," Bran said, "and because he was a boy, and because he had been a boy in a tower once looking at the shape of a city, and because some part of him was now a city." He went quiet then and counted his breaths up to 30 and back to 1. Snow piled on the windowsill. Somewhere outside the yard a wolf howled in a way that was not for sorrow or for pride, but for the fact of being. Men lifted their heads the way clocks do when a door opens. Sansa put her hand to Bran's shoulder and leaned very lightly, and the pressure of it was everything the world had meant when it invented affection and did not know yet what to do with it. "Do you think," she asked, very so soft, "that when winter is done we'll still sing the same songs?" "I don't know," he said, "but we will sing." She stood with him and listened to the snow patter off the window's lead. The small whisper that says a thing is happening and you are inside it, and the sound of men's laughter held close to their bodies not to lose too much heat. The heart tree kept its long watching. Far beyond the walls, the dark woke itself and tried on different names, and one of the names it tried was not a word at all, but a sound you feel in the bones of a frozen thing. The ice answered. The wind arranged itself into an old shape. The wall stood. In the deep of night, Bran dreamed he stood at the edge of a wood black as the memory of fire, and a man with a face like a weathered tavern table came and sat with him, and took a knife and whittled at nothing until it became something. The something was a small bird. The man handed it to Bran. It was crude and perfect. "Not all birds need to fly," the man said. "Some need only to be what they are for the hand that holds them." Bran woke with his palm cramped as if it had held a thing all night. He and Sansa went to the Godswood after breakfast. She told him a story this time, the kind that children tell themselves about lost sisters they will find, about broken swords that will be tempered and made whole, about songs that came out of cities and survived in the mouths of women in kitchens, broken, and found their way back into halls once the fire had done its worst. He listened and let the tree hear. The tree did not care about kings or lines, only about the way the roots made a net under a world that would otherwise simply drop. The day went on, and a raven came and sat on the window and cocked its head at Bran, and he knew from the light in its beady eyes what it said. News from the wall, he told his sister. He had not yet read the letter. He did not know what it said. He did not need to. They sat together, and he turned the seal over in his hand a last moment, because sometimes it is a mercy to let not knowing breathe for a minute. He broke it finally and read, and his breath left him and returned, and his eyes met Sansa's, and they both heard the same word. "Now," he said. It was not a cry. It was a note held true. She put her hand in his. They told their father and their brother what the wall knew. The old gods listened through the tree whose face would not look away. Somewhere far away, a boy who had been told by a wild thing to climb and not fall would find that every fall he had ever taken had been practice, not for flying, but for the particular kind of not breaking that has nothing to do with bone. He thought then of the scaffold, of birds hitting like rain, of roots cracking old carpenters' careful work, of his father's hands finding a rung in the dark. He thought of all the things that had made that day, and all the things that would be made by this one. He thought of the way choosing is like walking on a frozen river. There is only one thin sound between you and the depth, and if you listen you can make friends with it. He held Sansa's hand until his fingers warmed, and then he let go, and they went together to find the others and to begin. The parchment was rough under Ned's fingers, the seal broken with such care that the wax had kept its shape. He held it as if it might bite, though the words had already done that. Rangers lost at the fist, dead things walking in the wood, fires that will not warm, winds that do not tire. 3 blasts in the night. Send men, send food, send iron, send faith. Eamon's hand had written it. The letters had a gentleness to them that hurt more for it. The old man's mind had never confused clarity with comfort. Ned passed it to Robb and then to Brynden, and their eyes met over the edges of the room like 2 hounds catching the same scent. "So," Brynden said, not quite softly, "your south grows quieter and your north starts to sing a song I would rather not learn." "The south will not be quiet," Robb said. "It only holds its breath between shouts." "It does not matter," Ned told them. and his voice did that thing it did when people stopped mistaking him for a man who could be persuaded. "Our work is here." Bran listened as if he were the room's third wall. The heart tree had told him what the letter told in words that were colder and older. He could still hear, from that night, the echo of horns that had not been blown at Winterfell but had been heard here all the same. Once for rangers, twice for wildlings, thrice for a thing that had learned to hate heat long before men learned to love it. Sansa stood by the fire, her hands open toward it as if willing it to be enough. The heat on her palms made the letters move under her eyes. She did not pretend to understand men's maps, but she understood the way fear runs, downhill to the lowest door. Winterfell had many doors, so did she. She closed what she could. "Food," she said, startling herself by speaking first. "We send food now, before the roads become walls." "Wyman will open his halls," Robb said. "He must." "He will," Ned said. "And Moat Cailin will be more than ruins. It will be gate and guard again. I'll send word to Barrowton, to White Harbor, to Deepwood and Bear Island. The white knife must be used while it can be used. We will float what we cannot drag. Men?" Brynden prodded, his eyes like flints in sunlight. "The Watch needs them. Men who can look at a thing and not make it into a story." "We'll send our poachers," Ned said. "And men who have known hunger. Boys who were born to run on snow. Not the ones who want songs written. The ones who already don't believe songs. And steel." "Dragonglass," Bran said, too quickly. Maester Luwin's mouth made a shape like doubt. "In the hoard beneath the hill," Bran added, which was not an answer to anything Luwin had asked aloud. "The old hoard from the first building, where the masons buried broken stone for luck. There are black knives there." Ned did not even look surprised anymore when Bran spoke that way. He nodded as if someone had simply reminded him where he'd put a key in his own house. "Rangers lost," Robb said again, reading, and his voice made a sullen note. "Jon. He will have learned what he needs to know," Ned said, and Sansa heard the whole weight of a father's prayer rest on the word will. Jon flexed his hand over the hilt of his sword because the hand kept wanting to open as if to let something go, and he needed it to close. The fist had been a shape under them, strong stone, until it wasn't. He could still see in the dark behind his eyes the blue of the first sword to come at him. He could still hear the horn, that third note that wants to crack a man's ribs to make room for itself. When the dead came, they came unlike weather. Weather announces itself by degrees, leaning into a day until the day tips and you are under it. The dead were abrupt, like a mistake with no correction. Light went wrong in the spaces between men's bodies, and horses tried to jump a wall that wasn't there and fell to their knees screaming, and the screaming went out. The first thing Jon killed that night was a man he had eaten with at noon. The last thing he tried to kill did not care for iron in the way things that live do. Sam had run with his candle like a child in a story, and Jon had wanted to laugh at the sight and then wanted to cry, and then had wanted to call back a god he'd never learned and ask for the smallest favor. Let that fat, good boy not stop. He didn't stop. The world stopped around him and let him through, which is sometimes what you get instead of mercy. Mormont's voice had cut the night, haggard and exact. "Retreat to the south trail. No horses. Drop your packs." He had a raven on his shoulder the entire time, like a jest bought at a fair, and the raven had screamed words it didn't understand until the words became a kind of courage. Jon caught Gren's arm and PYP's collar and a stranger's wrist and dragged, and he saw a man he did not know fall and thought later, "I never learned your name," and it hurt like a splinter you cannot pull out. After, at Craster's, the fire was not allowed to go out, and the smell of it was not warmth but the memory of wolves at the edge of light. The Lord Commander slept sitting up with his sword ACR. Was at his knees, and the sword looked like an old man's stick. Craster grinned with his black stumps of teeth and spit into the fire and told men who had not asked what his gods liked best. Sam sat with his hands over his belly as if holding something inside it that needed telling it belonged to him. Jon dreamed of the wall as it had been when ice was a fresh thought, when men were still marveling at the idea that a thing could stand against sky. He woke with frost in his beard and a feeling in his bones like a story someone else had begun for him. When the letter left the wall, The ravens took it like an insult they were glad to deliver. They flew with the wind, and the wind wanted to be helpful for once and went the right way. On the Iron Islands, the wind had other manners. It smelled of old fish and the last part of a storm. The great kraken hung carved above a hall where prayer sounded like anger and uncle smelled like grief. Theon stood among men who were his blood and his misfortune both, and smiled in a way that did not convince his own face. "You want what?" Asha asked him later, sitting with her boots up on a table that had seen men die and be crowned over it. "Winterfell? With how many men? With what plan? Will you blow on the walls until they come down to spare you their boredom?" "You took Deepwood," he said, and hated the sound of his envy. "I took Deepwood with men who look at me and see not only a brother's daughter," she returned. "I took it with the patience of a woman sewing, stitch by stitch, hardly moving, until the garment exists. You do not have patience for stitching. You want a trumpet." "I want to be a son again," he said, and her mouth softened for the only time that night, the only time he later remembered when he could bear remembering anything. Balon gave Theon raiders and the right to pretend the orders had not been changed 3 times while the words were still in the air. Theon went ashore with a bite of salt on his tongue and a map in his head that had been made by a boy who had once thought himself a Stark. The map was wrong in all the right ways. The garrisons were thicker. Moat Cailin had more men than Rot. The villages did not leave their doors unbarred. Word had gone quiet and quick and taken root. He took Torrens Square as if he were taking a loaf from a shelf that had someone's name on it, and it cut him and tasted of someone's blood. He sent men toward Winterfell under darkness and under orders to be clever. They stumbled on a patrol led by Daisy Mormont, who had once killed a grown boar with a short spear and the kind of patience Asha had meant. The first arrow took a man through the cheek. The second took a thought out of a third man's head as it reached for doing. The men who lived did so by lying down and letting the snow treat them like stones. Theon found this out from the last of them, who came to him with his face pale as fish and his mouth full of awe for a woman's aim. "They will hang my men," Theon said mechanically, and the man shrugged with the indifferent holiness of a sailor who has given his future to the sea. Ramsay Snow arrived later in the way men like him arrive. Like smoke, like something you smell before you know what it is. He wore friendliness like a shirt he could tear off when it itched. "You tried to take their home," Ramsay said, smiling. "Good. We must always try to take the thing that will break the most hearts. But you need a door to knock down. Let me be your door." Theon walked with him on a frozen morning and knew a thing with his bones that his brain refused. He knew that if he walked 3 steps more with Ramsay, something would go wrong with the story of his life in a way he could not undo. He turned when a raven crossed their path and croaked as if laughing. "I'll make my own doors," he said, and made for his men. Ramsay smiled without changing shape, filed the moment away, and pretended to be helpful until there was nothing left of a certain band of raiders but their names spoken badly in other men's mouths. He drifted back to the Dreadfort with a new thought about his Lord Father's ambitions and the North, and Roose Bolton listened in the calm way of a man who would not pick a fight with a cold wind if he could avoid it. At White Harbor, Wyman Manderley weighed grain with a care that suggested the grain were his children. He sat heavy in a chair that had been sized for a man who had thought bigger of himself than even Wyman did. "The white knife is yours," he told Ned through a mouthful of truth. "We can send barges upriver as if we were fat fish going to spawn. We'll move barrels as if we were guilty of kindness. We will do it fast because I am fat, but I am not lazy, and the river is never lazy." Wyman loved a well-phrased insult to himself almost as much as a good pie. He waved men who were not noble but mattered most into the hall and let them speak. Boatmen and rope makers, women who knew where the ice came first and the hour it would go, a boy who had fallen through ice and lived to tell the place not to walk. These people filled the space where, in more ceremonial times, a gaggle of cousins would have drunk. "We'll run longboats up and send sledges back," a boy with a scar on his chin said. "Men to pole and men to push, hounds to pull. We'll have a sign, a banner colored like a weight of bread." "Bread would be a poor banner," Manderley laughed. "Half the realm would come after us with knives." "I would," the boy said deadpan, and the hall laughed like granaries opened. The first barges left under a sky that looked like it did not approve of any plan that did not involve itself. The river agreed with Wyman's stubbornness. It carried, it received, it closed over passage as if erasing a memory men had no business keeping. At Molestown, the wind made the brothels into husks that held something like warmth, and some of the girls took the rope of their lives and turned it toward rescue, not money. They passed stew to men with hands too numb for anything else. They turned their mirrors toward the door to catch and throw back the bleakness a little. At the wall, one raven watched the river as if it were an enemy coming and could be fought by mere watching. Maester Eamon fed it pieces of bread and said a word over each piece, the way a priest puts names on candles. He did not tell anyone the names. On Dragonstone, the tide clawed at rocks with all the affection it could spare. Davos Seaworth stood in a chamber that smelled of damp salt and burnt wax and read a letter that said, in careful words that had been written by a man with a life full of careful words, "Come north. If you are a king, prove it here. If you are a man, do not let boys fight this for you. If you are neither, stay and burn in your temple." Stannis Baratheon had a face like stone left in rain. Melisandre stood with her small smile and the confidence of one whose faith can afford not to be liked. "I have seen snow," she said in a voice that tried to make snow into a god. "I have seen fire in it. I have seen a boy bound to a tree and a man with a sword of light. I have seen coin," Davos interrupted, soft and flat, and Stannis's eyes flicked to him with the peculiar gesture of gratitude he gave, slight, as if regretting it even as he offered it. "On the decks of Lys and Myr, I have seen men live on it and die for lack of it. I have seen winter in the eyes of sailors who have been north and claim they haven't. This letter is not coin, your grace, but it can buy you the only thing worth buying, the remainder of a realm." Melisandre's eyes burned blue for a heartbeat, not red. She looked toward the north as if measuring an opponent she had not yet known how to hate. "The cold god," she whispered. "He thinks himself a lord. Then go tell your god that a king would like an introduction," Stannis said, and the line of his mouth did a small, fierce thing that would serve a man on a horse or a plank equally well. "We sail for the wall." Salador San made a vulgar noise and counted the prophet he would not make out loud in a language that made the counting into a rhyme. Then he called to his boats as a father calls to his sons to hurry. Sansa's needle bit her thumb and brought a bead of blood that shocked her for an instant by being bright and normal. She put it in her mouth and tasted metal and a little fat. "You hold it wrong," old Nan would have said, and Sansa could hear the scold and the affection together and wanted very badly, for a breath, to be scolded by Nan again. She taught women in the kitchens to count by meals instead of days. She stood in the lane between winter houses and asked who still had boots and who needed straw and who had thread and who had a story to tell a child. She took a beating from a man whose grief had come down over his sight like a sack, and afterward the man's wife found Sansa where she was washing the blood off with snow and cried into Sansa's hands for a long time, and they were both comforted in a way that made no sense and all the sense in the world. Sansa knew songs about queens who saved cities with words. She learned now that a larder well shut in time was better than any ballad. Rickon followed the dogs and the dogs followed him. Shaggy Dog shadowed him like a piece of his fear that had agreed to protect him. The boy slept under the table in the great hall sometimes because he liked the sound the table made when men thumped it in agreement. He showed Sansa the places in Winterfell she had forgotten. The step that skipped when you took it too fast, the crack in the wall where a rook feather had blown in and stayed, sight of their father's knife marks against the kitchen doorframe where height had been recorded with ceremony and laughter. Sansa marked Rickon's height without laughter and kissed the top of his head and told him a story about a wolf who learned the word patience and hated it and lived because of it anyway. Bran spent more time under the tree than in his bed, and Osha grumbled and brought furs and soup and held the spoon to his mouth when his body refused to be as obedient as the roots. Hodder stood beside him as if the winter might be a big horse and need calming. Maester Luwin watched his lord's son with care like a man considering a bridge he would never cross. Bran did not try to take the city again. He took smaller things and learned how small things contain everything. He took a vole one night and felt the entire world be hunger and frost and the wet sense of tunnels. He took a fish under the ice of the moat and learned what patience tastes like, which is iron and green and no anger at all. He took a snow-flecked raven and watched the barges move upriver and felt, just once, a strange alignment, a sense that his will and the rivers had decided not to quarrel. He also learned to send messages without birds. The roots of the old forest spoke to one another with a slowness that could be faster if asked the right way. He could lay an urgency into a sapline and know that somewhere a mile off an oak would groan and let it pass. The words were simple and had to be, now, bread, men, cold. He became very careful about the word now because the tree had taught him its shape. At Riverrun, between the sound of the Red Fork and the Tully words that had always meant more than people wanted to admit, Catelyn held Jaime Lannister's gaze as if holding it made the world easier to hold. He was not beautiful anymore in a way that demanded songs. He was beautiful in a way worn things are, honest about what had scratched them. He had a way of listening now that made her want to forgive him and then hate him for how much work that would be. "The girl," she said, meaning Arya, and he blinked as if she had thrown salt in his eyes. "The wild one," he said, and a corner of his mouth lifted in a rueful admiration he could not afford. "If she's lived, she'll keep doing it. If she's dead," Catelyn said evenly, "I will still need her back." "That's a strange thing to say," he observed, curious enough to forget to make it cruel. "It is the only thing to say," she answered, and he dropped his eyes because men who live by swords never quite know what to do with a woman's exact love. "You will go back to your sister at some point, Ser Jaime. You will be traded or taken or stolen. If you go under my word, you will bear a letter with it. If you go by someone else's treachery, you will still bear my word. You will bring me news of my girls, or you will find nothing to bring and come anyway. You will do this because you are tired of being a toy." He laughed then, a brittle, tired sound. "I am tired of many things. I am not sure I am tired of being myself." "Then be more of yourself," she suggested. "Be as proud of keeping a promise as you are of breaking one." He stared at her for a long time. In the next hall, Brienne of Tarth kept her own counsel, which was more honest than most men's. When the ravens out of King's Landing began to lie about Sansa, claiming she had fled with a Sellsword to a whore's life and would be found in disgrace, claiming she had been taken by bandits who would send a finger if the Starks did not kneel, claiming she had turned against her house and was seen with a Tyrell, Ned laughed with a sound that made Maester Luwin shiver. He sent back one letter in return to a dozen. Said, "Your lies carry your signature." He did not sign his name. He did not need to. Cersei Lannister began to think about the North the way a cat thinks about a closed door. Tywin thought about it the way a banker thinks about an account nearly insolvent. Sourly, with a plan for recovery that would taste like blood to someone else. Tyrion, who spent his days learning to be in pain well and his nights adding columns no one would thank him for, thought about the North the way an engineer thinks about a piece of the wall he cannot see and has to trust. He asked Varys in gentle ways if Sansa had wings now. Varys answered in the way he always did, with kindness that made a cut you did not feel until later. Stannis' sails came north like teeth. The sea liked him for the first time in its long career of disliking men. The spray off the prow felt like something earned, not given. Melisandre stood on the deck with her red clothes bright as if the sun had spilled out of itself. She narrowed her eyes at white on the horizon and whispered a word to it that made Ned's hair stand on his neck when he read it later in a letter men who had seen it wrote. She said, "Enemy." She said it with interest. Castle Black welcomed them like a man who does not want to be grateful but will be anyway. The watch staggered into a kind of order under the sight of unfamiliar banners. Stannis rode through the gate and looked at the wall the way a man looks at a mountain he has not decided whether to like. It looked back in the slow way ice has. You can almost think you have not been noticed. Then you see your breath and know you have. Jon stood with Alliser Thorne and Donal Noy and Dennis Mallister and other men who had learned to be a small part of a big thing. He watched Stannis dismount and thought a thought he could not have thought a year ago. A king is a man who is not surprised that you are not surprised by him. "Lord Snow," Stannis said, and Jon blinked, and Stannis' mouth twitched very slightly because he had wanted to surprise the boy and had. "Jon," Davos said in a different voice entirely. One a man uses to talk to an orphan, to a boy whose eyes have had to grow up too fast, to a wolf dogged by hunger. Can you show me where the wind hits worst? Yes, Jon said, and took them to the top of the wall, which is to say to the edge of the world. Stannis looked out at White and farther White and pulled his cloak closer, and Melisandre laughed once under her breath, as if remembering something unkind, and then put a hand to the ice as if it were a lover she wanted to turn. Davos read Ned Stark's letter to the watch by the fire. He read it like a prayer and like a recipe and like a warning. Said, "We will hold the neck. We will hold our lands. We will not kneel in any hall that cannot keep its own candles lit. We will bring our song north and sing it low. We will bind wounds you have had no hands left to bind. We will not make new ones for a season." Stannis raised an eyebrow at the word season because it was mealy-mouthed the way southern words can be, but in Ned's hand it felt like iron wrapped in cloth for a child to hold. "He will not name me," Stannis said, not quite annoyed and not quite impressed. "He named you when he asked you," Davos said. "In the north, a man names when he decides. Until then, he points. Then I shall do something for him to point at," Stannis muttered, and told his captains to count how many men they might lose and still keep the wall and how many men they might gain by spending those men carefully. They lost fewer than the sum of the sums. The wildlings south of the wall died to men who had learned to hate their neighbors more than their rulers. Mance Rayder came with skill and a piece that could have been a weapon. Stannis took the offer, heard it, tasted it, and set it aside to cool. He did not know yet that sometimes the North would rather die than pick a side as quickly as a Southern man expects. Jon stood at the edge of that conversation, quiet as a snowfall and as present, and thought of a girl with hair the color of fox, and thought of the reason men break oaths when they are alone. Bran felt all of this as one feels whether moving in the bones. He took the trees and looked for blue in the dark and found it. He took a hawk and looked down at a ridge and saw men with antlers in their beards eating a man whose blood steamed in a way that made the hawk wake in his hands. He took a weasel once and fought another weasel and won and learned nothing except what victory feels like when it is too small to matter. He took summer and ran along, close run in snow that made a whispering noise, and came upon a line of men with their cloaks held tight around their lives and led them by showing them paths nobody but a wolf would think to use. One of the men fell and another lifted him, and the first man said to the second, "If we live, I'll make you a cup." And the second said, "If we live, I'll let you." And Bran loved them both briefly and knew nothing of their names. The Freys were a scab that would not heal. They sent messages full of phrases piled like furniture in the yard. They wanted apologies for slights that had not happened. They wanted daughters to be called jewels and sons to be called pillars and their lord to be called father, grandfather, great-grandfather, until the word meant nothing. Ned let them write. He answered each letter with one sentence: "We will not cross you again. If you want to cross us, we will push you into the river." Walder Frey laughed and coughed and spat and waited and sent small men north to see if there were cracks anywhere a dagger could fit. Most of the men came back speaking well of the food and nothing else. Roose Bolton read letters twice and once backward. He held a candle to them as if they might have been written in lemon juice. He took Ramsay into his confidence as much as a man like him can be said to have confidence, which is to say he let his bastard stand near a map and not outside the door. This made Ramsay feel like a god until the next moment when he felt like less than a man. It was a recipe for something none of them would like the taste of later. Sansa went to the Godswood before dawn and found Arya there, only for an instant, as a memory the tree let her borrow. In the memory, Arya was laughing because she had made a boy fall by kicking out his foot just so, and he had called her a name, and she had been delighted by the truth in it. Sansa leaned her head against cold bark and whispered, "Come," and the tree said, "Already." Arya stood with Gendry in a smithy in a town that had burned a little and cooled a lot. The boy banged on a sheet of iron he pretended was an enemy and made it into a plowshare because some man had paid him to, and Arya loved him for doing that instead of something grander. She learned the road's map by how the inn smelled. A sweet beer here, a sour stew there, a pail that was always clean outside the back door of a place where the woman had had a baby last winter and everything in her life had to be orderly since. She stole fate from small moments the way boys steal apples. quickly and with a grin that is half apology and half promise. When she slept, she dreamed a wolf walking through snow without leaving a track. When she woke, she looked back and saw she had left tracks like little stabs. The first big storm of the year came down on the neck like a war. Men on the causeway threw ropes and curses with equal elegance. The bog devoured a cart and burped. Harl the bog boy, who had never heard a harp, spit brown and told Wendell Manderley that he was a fool for heavy wagons. And Wendell laughed and pushed anyway, and the wagon came up, and Harl went red to the ears in the invented winter warmth of a man's praise. The reeds sent men with spears that looked like reeds themselves, and they placed their feet on tussocks and moved in ways that made it seem as if the trees had invited them. "Winter is a door we know," Howland Reed said to Ned when they met where the ground floats and doesn't. "It does not always lead where we would like. It leads away from folly," Ned said. "Sometimes," Reed aloud, and his eyes looked deep inward for a moment at something only he could see. Perhaps a tower and a bed and blood, and the way promises are a kind of weather too. The wall had a night like the inside of a coffin, cramped and breathless and too intimate with wood. Men listened for the wrong sounds. When the right one came, the scrape of bone not meant for moving, they nearly missed it. Stannis had set watchers like an obsessive father sets chores. They saw before they believed. The first of the dead came to the ice like men who have forgotten how to climb but remember that they used to. Jon fired and his arrow knocked something loose and it did not fall. It looked at him. He did not back away. Winterfell had never taught him to retreat without thought. They burned them and they came again. They burned more. They learned to take heads when they could because the brain is a candle in a skull and the skull is a bad jar for candles when the wax wants to trick you. Sam wrote 2 letters by accident when he meant to write one. One to Jon that said nothing a man could not say by sitting next to another and breathing in time, and one to a girl named Gilly that said everything his mouth could not yet. He sealed the wrong one and sent it out with the raven, and the bird did not care about the mistake because birds do not understand the subject of letters in the way men do. Gilly kept the other in her dress like a hot stone and read it with her finger moving slowly under each word. "You are brave," it said, which is often untrue when said to women and true when said to those who have had no choice. She touched Sam's name and thought of leaving, and then she thought of leaving again, and then she left. Stannis fought at the wall the way a book fights, with rules and with biting where you can afford to bite and not bothering to flail. Davos put torches in men's hands and did not mind that his fingers burned. Melisandre stood and called names into the dark and seemed to expect the dark to answer politely. When it did not, she smiled as if on a bet with herself, and Dee kept calling. Jon killed and killed and killed and began to feel less like a boy and more like a door. Doors do not weep. He did once, when no one was looking, out of a fury that had nowhere to go but out of his eyes. When the storm broke, men slept where they stood, a trick learned by men who have spent time at sea or with children. Jon went to the top of the wall and looked north and then south and thought that no matter how far he might go in his life, there would always be this: a rope under his hands, the smell of cold in his sinuses, a feeling of being both very small and very much the right size. He took paper and wrote, "Brother, we will need you." He did not add anything because anything else would have been about the small boy who had learned to wrap his wrapped hand around a practice sword in Winterfell's yard. Ned came, not with banners, but with men bundled inside themselves and food that could be cooked in anything in pots that nested in a way that would make a merchant's wife nod. The North arrived as a habit arrives, the way you begin to say please to doors in a house that creaks. He met Stannis by the flayed trees, because the 1 yard of Castle Black that isn't ugly is more suspect than the rest. "You took your time," Stannis said. The words could have been cruel if a different mouth had made them. In his, they were almost a compliment to the understanding that time belongs mostly to weather. "I took the time there was," Ned said, and then inclined his head the smallest imaginable fraction. "Your Grace." Stannis nodded as if someone had him on strings. "You will give me the North," he said bluntly, "because some men cannot be happy until they have stabbed a conversation in its softest belly." "I will give you my work," Ned said. "When this is done, I will decide whether I can give my knee. You can have my counsel without asking for it. You can have my men at the wall today. You can have my word that the neck will not open to your enemies. Call it tribute if your sleep needs the word. I call it what it is. Sense. Davos smiled with something like relief. Melisandre watched the trees the way a cat watches another cat. She did not like the feeling that a god could exist who did not require candles. They sat together with maps that could barely bear the heat of the coals under the table. They counted arrows. They counted the hours a man can stand guard before he begins to dream with his eyes open. They counted the number of pots of stew that could be fed to men who had already had stew, which is a number one learns to keep track of when one has a winter to get through. We will lose some, Stannis said. We will gain more than we lose if we lose them for someone else, Ned returned. You talk like a Northman, Stannis grunted. I am one, Ned said, and the corner of his mouth moved in a way that seemed almost like a man discovering a joke inside himself. Sansa wrote to the women of the winter town in a careful hand that did not show how much she had learned to turn fear into small chores. She wrote, "Today we mend. Tomorrow we mend as well. When the men come home, they will need to put their arms around something that is not made of iron. Make bread, clean, light lamps, say their names. If they do not come home, say them anyway." She did not sign her name. The letter did not need it. It carried her voice like steam carries the smell of soup. Arya bent over a fire that made every piece of her clothing smell like old days and cooked a broth from onions and a bone and the last mercy of a neighbor. Gendry came in with cold in his beard and a look like a man who has nearly learned to like an honest job. "What are you smiling at?" he asked her, because he could see it through the smoke. "I'm practicing," she said, "in case I need to look kind later." "You're bad at it," he said, and she hit him lightly with a ladle. And for a piece of the evening they were children, which is to say kings of a small room. Jaime Lannister rode under guard out of the Riverlands with Brienne at his side. The world became narrower wherever he went, men stepping aside, fields keeping their produce to themselves. He dreamed some nights of a girl with red hair, which shocked him, because he had only ever dreamed of one woman and she had gold for hair and poison for a heart. He could not put this dream away easily, the way one puts away a cloak in summer. It was a dream of a girl who looked at him and did not hate him and did not love him but asked him for a thing he had never thought he could be, useful without flattery. He thought of standing before Catelyn and promising and hating it and wanting it, and came near to the strange edge of a decision he had never had to make, to be the better of his two selves on purpose. Roose Bolton took counsel with himself, which is how he liked it. He sent letters that no one could quite read correctly. He put men in places that made no sense if you thought about Lannisters and made perfect sense if you thought about hunger and winter. He lay next to his lady and did not look at her, and she stared at the ceiling and counted the knots in the wood and did not know whether to be afraid of the king in the south or the cold in her bed. The first dead thing that reached Moat Cailin did not look like a man. It looked like a line of winter that had gotten lost. The men on the causeway watched it because watching is what you do when nothing else appears proper. Then it moved wrong, and they learned the lesson all the stories would have taught them if the stories had been told with less relish. The dead can be patient. The archers shot with their mouths open. One of them whistled between his teeth as if calling a dog and found the sound very comforting while he did it. "Remember the heads," a boy called, because boys remember everything said to them at a pitch of fear. "And the Bernie. Ing." They burned the pieces too long because the first time a man learns an old lesson again, he rubs it in until it chafes. The bog took some of the ashes and made darker mud. At Winterfell, the Weirwood's red sap had thickened in the cold and looked like a thought refusing to leave. Bran pressed his forehead to the bark and saw a field under the snow where, in summer, men would have cut hay, and he knew the hay's exact smell though he had never been there in summer. He saw the wall, which knew more now than it had known that morning. He saw a fire on a mountain too far for any man to be standing by it. He saw a white shape on ice that his mind did not want to make into anything at all. The door to the gods would creaked and Sansa slipped in as if she were doing a child's trick. She sat beside Bran and did not ask him what he saw. "I can feel it," she said instead. "The cold inside the cold. Like the echo inside a word when you say it too often." He nodded. "The tree gave me a dream," he said. "I think it was trying to be kind." "What did it show?" That sometimes the most important thing a man ever does is set a table. She smiled despite everything, because the wisdom of an old god that knew the value of bowls and spoons was exactly the kind of wisdom she could bear. She put her gloved hand over his and left it there until both their hands felt less like stones. "I think," she said carefully, "that when you saved Father, you did not change just a thing but the shape of things. I think that is why everything feels bigger, as if you opened a door and there turned out to be a hall behind it and not a room. It is frightening, but it means we have more places to stand." He did not answer. He did not need to. The tree made a sound under their hands like an old man agreeing. When word came that Stannis held the wall and had driven Mance back from the gate that matters, the North did not shout. It looked at its food and counted again, and men spat into their hands and decided to live, and the wolves did not stop running. Ned wrote one letter to Stannis that said, "You will be welcome in Winterfell when you come." He wrote another to Catelyn that said, "The boy will need me," meaning Robb, and then a third that said, "Our boy will need me," meaning Jon, and then he did a thing no one expected. He put his quill down and went out into the yard and laughed, a quick burst, as if someone had taken a stone out of his boot. "Something funny?" Brynden asked, amused and exhausted and impatient like a man with a full tankard and no time to drink. "I forgot there are two boys," Ned said, "and that I am lucky enough to be needed by both." Brynden lifted his tankard very slightly. "Don't let it go to your head," he advised. "You'll find it too heavy to hold up." The next storm came from the east. It had a character different from the first. It was speculative, as if trying out the idea of being permanent. The barges brought the last of the grain that could be made to move. The storehouses were shut, blessed, shut again. The doors of the houses that ring Winterfell closed. Smoke drew taut lines up into the sky that the wind played with like catgut. Ned made a point of walking the yard at night without guards. He nodded to the men who saw him and to the ones who pretended not to. He looked up at the wall and thought, as he rarely had, that walls are not for keeping enemies out only. They are for giving a shape to a fear so you can speak to it. Roose Bolton sent polite word that he could quarter men in Winterfell to save them from the hard north, and Ned stared at the letter like a man puzzled by a dried bloodstain. He sent back a line that said, "The men of the Dreadfort are needed at the Dreadfort, and the men of Winterfell are needed here." Roose folded the letter neatly and put it somewhere he kept items to remind himself that the world did not often give him what he wanted. Ramsay went out into the snow with a smile, hunted a man, and came back with it gone, as if he had left the smile at some house where it did not belong. At the wall, Stannis held councils that were a kind of penance for everyone involved. He tried on the word truce with the wildlings, to fit like a mail shirt, itchy but protective. Jon spoke for people who did not want him to speak for them and learned that that is what leadership feels like. He brought the wildlings south not because he loved them, but because he would rather look at them across a fire than hear them scratching under it. He sent a letter to Ned that said, "I am doing this because the night gives me fewer choices than a day would," and Ned wrote back, "Good," and that was the whole of it. The first white the people of the winter town saw came as a man asking for bread. He stood with his hands open, a posture of trust learned 3,000 years before by a man who had wanted to be fed by his neighbor. Sansa saw him and felt her mouth want to say, "Come in." She swallowed the word and said instead, "Wait," and fetched men with spears and a boy with good eyes and a woman with a torch. When they persuaded the thing out into the snow, its hands did not stay open. If a child had been there to see, it would have learned a useful lesson that it should never have had to: the difference between pity and mercy. Sansa went to her room afterwards and put her hands in her mouth and bit down and screamed into them and came out with tears frozen on her lips. She went to the kitchens and washed the torch handle herself, because some tasks are best done by the person who sets them, and when the cook tried to take it from her, she glared in a way that made the woman back away and then nod and say, "You do it," as if Sansa's anger were a story they both preferred to the truth. Bran dreamed that night of a man with a crown made of frost and boredom. The man looked at him as if he were a boy with his hand in a jar of sweets. Bran held the gaze because he had learned that sometimes looking back is a weapon. He woke with his heart going like a drum, and the tree's roots pressed into his back in a way that made him feel as if he had been held. He sent a word through the roots he had learned he could send. Come. He didn't mean the enemy. He meant old things that had slept too long. He meant the owls in the pines and the wolves in the shallow gorge to the east and the men who could still tell snow by smell. He meant, come near, come home, come now. The roots carried it in every direction like a rumor that everyone is rude enough to repeat. When the worst of the winter came, and it had not yet, the halls were already hot with bodies and quiet with the absence of want that could be managed. Children learned to play games that required very little movement and very little talking. Men began to tell stories and then stopped because the children were listening. Women sat in knots and mended and did something better than pray. They planned. Ned came in at dawn from an inspection of the guards with ice in his beard and his hands to the fire. Sansa poured him something hot without thinking through the act, and he looked up at her and saw not a child, not a lady, but a person he could rely on the way he had once relied on another lord in the field. He nodded, a gesture full of years he did not have to spend explaining it. "Do you remember?" he said, startling himself into remembering it. "The kite you made when you were small?" Sansa did. She remembered the way the wind got into the cloth and became a creature, and the way the string burned your palms if you tried to hold it back, and the way laughing and crying had been hard to tell apart that day because the sky was so full of intention. "We do that now," he said. "Let the wind be the thing. Hold the string." "I can," she said, "and then let it be the truth. Downriver." Theon tried to imagine a face that would forgive him. No face came. He thought of a girl with tears on her cheek and a torch, and then he pushed the thought away because it did not belong to his story. He made a choice in that bitterness that was nearly a decent choice. He turned his men toward the stony shore and away from Winterfell. He would raid where his father would nod and the North would survive it. He would not be the man who set fire to a hall that had held him. He told no one. He kept the secret of his small mercy the way men keep secrets they think will be stolen by someone and taken to be used against them. Ramsay smiled when he heard this and did not show his teeth. He wrote a letter to someone he did not sign, because the habit of doing harm had become a style with him. South, on the King's Road, Jaime and Brienne met a man with a harp who had been to King's Landing and had seen the Red Keep by night and thought it looked like a stove. He sang a song about it that was too pretty for the subject and then asked Brienne if she would like to buy a different song, and she told him she had no coin, and he told her the song was for free since it had been paid for by other people's pain. Brienne did not laugh. Jaime did, and then did not, and the moment passed between them like a single, unshared breath. Beyond the wall, the white quiet pressed down, and under it, things moved. The dead did not need to rest. The living did. Mance gathered his people with a rueful cheer and told them to keep their children under their cloaks with their hands on their mouths, as if learning the shape of a prayer. He sent a boy with a message south, and the boy did not come back, and Mance did not curse because cursing wastes heat. Stannis made decisions as if cutting meat and placed men in places that would cost them dearly and save more dearly. He put faith in Jon Snow with a kind of recognition that he would not have liked to name. He told Davos to do something that required delicacy. Davos did it. Melisandre told him to do something that required devotion. He did not do it, and she smiled as if that was the right answer anyway, which was the first time he believed she might not be as simple as he wanted her to be. Spring would come someday, the way a truce sometimes does between two men who have no particular forgiveness for one another and find some anyway because there is a river to cross that will drown both if they do not help. Between now and that morning, the snow would make itself felt in the bone, and in the way chairs scrape, and in the way mothers hold their children and convince them to sleep. Bran slept under the tree on purpose for the first time in days. He dreamed of a cave full of roots and a man woven into them who opened one eye and smiled a dry, kind smile and said, "Patience is a weapon." Bran woke and did not try to hold the dream. He knew he would go north one day, and he knew why he would not yet. The North needed him awake in Winterfell, sending now and bread and men and cold into the roots with a care that felt like the most adult thing he had ever done. Ned stood at the gate with Robb and watched a file of men go out with ropes on their shoulders and sledges at their heels and dogs eager to be dogs. He counted them automatically. He stopped when he realized what he was doing and let the count go because counts are for men who want to know how much they own. He wanted to know how much they had given. "One day," Rob said, "this will make a story." "One day," Ned said, "I'll be happy if it makes a harvest." They turned back in together and shut the gate to keep the heat in and the cold out, as if doors could teach winter manners. In a way, they can. At the wall, John wrote a note to himself and tucked it under a plank. Hold. He did not think of anyone reading it. He did not think of anyone finding it. He put it there because sometimes you need to make a word into an object to believe it. Then he went out into the wind and let it be the thing. He held the string and felt it burn. He did not let go. And in the godswood, under the red hands and the carved face that had learned to be both pity and ferocity, Bran breathed and the tree breathed back, and somewhere very far away and very close, a blue eye closed and opened again, and it knew that the door was open into a hall and not into a room, and it hated that, and the hatred was a good cold, the kind you can prepare for. The snow fell. The wolves ran. The bread stayed good in the storehouses, because the women checked the bins and turned the sacks and smiled their small smiles and held the place together with the patient violence of love. The letter from the wall came like a bird staggering. One word again, but written by a different hand, one John had learned to make by force of being told to write when he had wanted to swing a sword. Said, "Now." He sent it because patience is a weapon but timing is a battle. Ned read it and Rob read it over his shoulder, and Brynden closed his eyes for the space of a blink that was not like sleep but like agreement. Sansa brought cloaks and bread and smiles that were not lies. Bran put his hand on the tree and sent the word again, but a little different, with a taste of something he had stolen from a vole and a fish and a hawk. Come. Winterfell moved like a hand. It opened, closed. It did not let go.